Welcome to The Decision from Nashville EO, where you will hear the rest of the story after tough decisions were made by entrepreneurs who faced adversity and lived to tell about it.
Welcome to The Decision, the podcast by EO Nashville, for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. We're having conversations with EO members, talking about the tough decisions they've made in the heat of battle with the help of their forum mates and the outcome that emerges from that decision. With me, as always, my partner in crime, Mr. Robert Hartline.
Good to be here.
Thanks for being here as always. And our guest today, one of my favorite EO members. I always say that, but this is really true, Matt. Matt Charette, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate being here and loved hearing the warm-up stories.
Yeah, we're going to have a great time today. And I am especially excited because you have given so much to EO members for so many years. We moderated a Catalyst forum together, and that kind of got me off on that path of doing that. But you've gone far beyond that. I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk just briefly about Catalyst and what that means to you.
Well, thanks for asking about that, because it is a passion for me. You know, it's a deep passion. And I think maybe part of the mission of this podcast is really kind of the same mission that I enjoy with Catalyst. It's when we've been talking in the warm up to the show about the struggles that we've had with entrepreneurship in our businesses. And most people don't get to see those things. And I know for me, entrepreneurship prior to joining EO was an incredibly lonely experience. You feel very alone, very isolated. And for me, I felt like I was doing everything wrong. I didn't feel like I could do anything right. And then I found this amazing organization called EO. In fact, I remember going to the membership meeting, and it was you and Alan Young. And I showed up, and Alan was the first person I met there. And you know, Alan, he's this big, tall, good-looking man, you know, confident. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? But he was so warm and engaging. It was amazing. And the thing that I remember most from that, not just his introductory story about, you know, what people think being an entrepreneur is like versus what it is really like. What I remember is when the EO members were showing up, they were all happy to see each other. And I didn't have that in my life. There was nobody who I could go talk to that understood what it was like to be me and what I was going through. And so seeing that really left an impression on me that maybe there are other people out here who understand what it's like to be me. And I wanted that. I wanted to be able to walk into a room with other people and be like, oh, I know what you're going through today. You know what I'm going through today. So we can sit here and enjoy ourselves now because we know that that's going on, but we don't have to talk about that unless we want to. And the beautiful part, as you know about EO, is it teaches you how to talk about those things that are kind of the unmentionables, the things that we don't talk about. And so, you know, fast forwarding into Catalyst, that's what I love. That's what I love, to be able to give back to other people, to know that they're not alone and that this journey that they're on is going to be amazing and remarkable. And it's going to be very, very challenging too. You know, one of the things that we do in the first class, you know, Michael and I will share our journey to entrepreneurship. And, you know, we put our resume up there. And what I did this year is I didn't want people to think that I knew everything. I didn't want people to think that I've got it all figured out and I don't have any problems. And, you know, there's that Jean-Paul Sartre quote that when you know the details of victory, it's hard to distinguish it from defeat. And I love that quote. And so what I did is I put my resume up there and had all the great things, you know. And then I've shared that quote, and then I put up the truth. I put up a business partner who I gave the business to because he ran the business in a different way. I put up, you know, all the struggles. I put up, you know, even in my life, you know, dropping out of college 3 times, you know, just all those challenges and, you know, the things that, you know, we struggle through as entrepreneurs. And, you know, I obviously put up about the tornado destroying my businesses because I didn't want people just to think that this was an easy ride and I've got it all figured out and you should listen to me. And I don't think really any of us here feel that way.
You're right. It's those struggles that we have that are not on public display. When people recognize us as entrepreneurs, it's typically when, we're all dressed up and we're doing something like this, right. And it's all the struggle that we have to overcome to get to that point where we look like we know what we're doing.
Right.
So on behalf of all of EO, thank you for the work that you've done for our chapter.
Oh, I'm the one who benefits from it. Years ago, I asked Michael how I could learn more about what Catalyst teaches. And he said, you really want to learn about it, you gotta be deeply involved in it and you got to teach it. If you really want to learn something, you got to teach it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if all EO members know this, but if you're a member of EO Nashville, you can go through Catalyst. Now, we ask that you help, which is how I got involved. And it's very fulfilling. I ended up, over the course of years, co-moderating one with you and 3 classes or 3 forums with Mike Rustacy. And I'm friends with a lot of those guys still today. Benjamin Hammond is a great friend of mine. I'll see him I talked to him yesterday. It's just a terrific program.
Yeah. I'm always thrilled when I see folks who were in Catalyst 3, 4, 5 years ago, whether they've entered the bridge program to help them transition because their business hadn't yet qualified to be an EO member or not, it doesn't matter, but then seeing them becoming EO members, that's really satisfying, because they've taken their business from 250,000 or whatever to over $1 million to qualify for EO by following the program. The program works if you follow it. Yeah. And so it's really satisfying to see that.
And if you're listening to this, eonashville.com, go there and there's a page on Catalyst. Tell you all about it.
Awesome. How about this? How about you catch us up to speed to the Matthew before EO?
Ooh, yeah, that's not going to be a pretty picture. So the Matthew before EO, I was in the Marine Corps, I played sports growing up. People don't believe me, but when I was 6 years old, I had a paper route. I was 6 years old and I had a paper route. Now, my youngest is 9, and I remember looking at her when she was 6 years old going, I cannot imagine her having a paper route. But I did, and it's what I did. I have 6 brothers and sisters, and there wasn't a lot of money growing up. But there was a set of train tracks on one end of town and another set of train tracks on the other end of town and a couple of rivers on the other side. And so if you live between those rivers and between those train tracks, you got your newspaper from one of us Charette kids. Mm. And I remember it was the summer before I went into 2nd grade, and my dad sat me down at the kitchen table, and he had a piece of paper and he drew out a square. He said, Matthew, you're going to start delivering newspapers just like your brothers and sisters. And you have 24 houses and it's all in this square. And your brother's going to spend a couple weeks teaching you how to deliver newspapers. And I did that all the way through high school. And that's how I made money.
Mm. Mm. And then what was your first official venture with employees? And
so when I first moved to town after I got out of the Marine Corps, I started working at the Wild Horse Saloon. And, I was in Desert Storm and I brought more of the war home than I ever cared to admit. But I started working at the front door at the Wild Horse Saloon, and I was going to college for my 4th time. And I just wanted a job with no responsibilities. But, one of the things that I learned in the Marine Corps is if you see things that you don't like, there is a way to change them. And you can either, I don't know if I can curse on this podcast or not, but
it's totally free reign.
Okay, you can bitch and complain all you want, or you can keep your mouth shut and do something about it. Mm. Now, there's another thing in the Marine Corps taught me is like, if you're doing the work, you have a right to bitch. If you're not doing the work, then shut up. Mm. Okay. And so I just saw things that I would love to change. And I was a hard worker and it was easy for me and I kept getting promoted. And so I went from the front door, I waited tables, I bartended, bar-backed, I was the supervisor, a manager, and then, 6 years into my employment there, I was the general manager. And that's great, except for I was not qualified for that position at all. I was a good number 2. I was a good assistant general manager, but my general manager left and he kind of recommended me for the position. I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready mentally, emotionally, just for the weight of that responsibility. I just wasn't ready. So I got fired, and was probably the best thing that happened to me, because I learned so much there. Not only did I learn a lot in college, but I learned so much there at the Wild Horse Saloon. Gaylord, I had some great bosses, had some not so good bosses, but I made a lot of connections. And, one of the things that happened there was my boss was trying to get the Budweiser concert series to come to the Wild Horse Saloon. He was trying to get Budweiser to pay for it, and they wouldn't do it. So he took Budweiser out and would not sell Budweiser, the flagship brand.
Wow.
And it was hard. It was hard on the staff because, it's a worldwide recognized brand, and you have tourists from all over the world coming, and they're ordering a Budweiser, and you have to tell them that you don't have it. So when I became general manager, one of the first things I did was put Budweiser back in. And I was talking to the owner of the local distributorship here one time, and I just said, listen, one of the first things I did when I became general manager was I put Budweiser back in, and no one said anything to me about it. Not a thank you, nothing. I saw his face change, and he said, you know what, Matt, you're right. Give me about an hour and I'm going to get back to you. And he set up a meeting, and he had 5 people from corporate Budweiser come and meet with me, and 4 people from his company come and meet with me. And we laid out a plan of what Budweiser could do for us. Well, fast forward to after I got fired, everyone's saying, Matt, you should just open your own place. And so I did. And I opened my own place, but I didn't have any money to advertise. But I had this really great relationship with Budweiser because of that.
Oh, wow.
And so the first advertising that I was able to do on the radio, Budweiser actually paid for.
Oh, it's so funny how many of these stories are like this in Nashville, because this town, you have to take care of people because they will take care of you always. Like, we do that. And I'm always amazed when we have that one person in this, like maybe they're new to Nashville or they do something like, that's okay in California, but no, it's not going to last long for you, my friend.
That's right.
But it's a great story. So what was your first endeavor?
The sports bar called Beyond the Edge. In fact, it was just voted the best sports bar in Nashville.
Wow.
Which I'm happy for, because I sold the businesses. I sold majority ownership of the businesses in January. So I'm really happy for the new owners.
Of this year. Wow.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Wow. So how's that transition been? Because that's always a challenging transition when you sell.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think before the tornado hit, and so the tornado hit East Nashville, and all 3 of my business took a direct hit. Because they're all right next to each other. And,
let's talk about that for a minute. We could. Yeah. What was that like?
Oh, first I have to say, like, these are just my businesses. Okay. My neighbors lost their homes. They're finding what little pictures of their childhood they could find on their front lawn. Sorry.
Puts everything in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I understood that these were just my businesses, and my home wasn't touched. I think even though you had Dave Punkachar on, he's kind of my neighbor. He lives about 800 yards away from me. And of course, his and his neighbors' houses were, some of his neighbors' houses were completely destroyed. Yeah. They're 800 yards from me. And I think I had a fence board on my roof, but no other damage. Of course, my restaurants, they took a pretty big hit. But again, it's not lost on me that it wasn't my home.
Yeah.
And, so it was tough. And so, like that night, we know there's storms in the area, but you know how when your phone would go off and you wouldn't really pay attention to it, you're like, this is annoying, right? Well, my wife and I were in bed and our phones are going off. But it was different, right? Because it was so loud outside. And I'm like, this is different. So I turned on the TV, and I don't know what station it was, what news station it was, but the weatherman said, if you're in East Nashville, get in your safe space because there's a tornado in your neighborhood. So we grabbed the kids and we went down to the basement and just kind of wrote it out. We we were only down there for a few minutes. It was that fast. And then I look at my phone and I've got a lot of missed calls, and it was the manager at the stores. And so I called him back, and he was really calm, which really surprised me. Because, in the restaurant business and the bar business, you get calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning of stuff going on. We've had those conversations, but it just felt different. And he goes, Matt, this is bad. He said, we've got people hurt. One of your buildings is completely destroyed. We've got broken glass. And I said, okay, I'll be there as soon as I can. And, we had remodeled their house. So I had some plywood, and I just grabbed some plywood and some tools. And I don't even know what I thought I was going to do when I got there, board up windows. I don't know, and, getting there was tough. I had to get out of my truck a few times and move debris out of the street just to get there. And, when I got there, he came out and he started telling me about the damage. I'm like, hold on a second. Where is everybody? I just need to see everybody first. I need to make sure that everybody's okay. And, at that point, we're just kind of looking at stuff, and we figured out, well, we better shut the gas off, So we shut the gas off. A big giant 70-foot tree fell through the roof of one of the restaurants. Most of the doors and windows were all blown out of all three places. And like I said, one of my buildings that didn't have a restaurant in it had a tattoo shop and a vintage clothing store. That was the one that took the direct hit. It was completely on the ground. Wow. Totally destroyed. Then a friend of ours, kind of funny. He's an actor, and he played one of the carpenters on one of the home improvement shows. Now he actually does that. He actually is a contractor now. But at the time, he only played the person. But he showed up with his tool belt, and he's like, what do you need? And so we started cutting up some plywood to try to put it on the windows. I don't know what we were thinking. We just tried to do something. And he's like, we didn't have the right screws to go into the metal. He's like, just go to the hardware store. I'm like, I'm not going to go break into the hardware store. There's a little Cumberland hardware store was right there in our neighborhood. A great little shop, great people run it. He's like, no, John and Sheila came and opened the store because they knew people were going to need stuff. And that's just the kind of neighborhood that East Nashville is. And that's the kind of place that Nashville is, like you were talking about.
Yeah, it's such a unique time for Nashville. Everyone's dealing with a pandemic. And then something that really wakes us up, happens. It was the way Nashville responded, the way EO responded, honestly, and the network, to everybody helping everybody. And I was moving stuff, and everybody was just really engaged with that.
It was amazing. One of the first calls I got was from Samira, and she's like, what do you need? I'm like, I don't even know. And all of a sudden, at one of my restaurants, I see a bunch of guys, like construction guys, they jump on the roof, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Get off of there. And he's like brushing me off. And then the supervisor came up. He's like, no, we're with Jeff Stockton's company. He sent us over here to take care of you. And so Jeff's an EO member, and, he right away, his company came over and got us set up so we could, get everything buttoned up. And,
so how long did you have the restaurants where you were controlling them before you sold them?
How long did I have them? A total of 18 years.
Yeah. And what brought you the decision to sell?
So I was getting burnt out. I always tell people this, that I really loved the restaurant business. For 15 years, I just absolutely loved what I did. The problem is I did it for 20 years, because it just, I think part of it was, I remember the first time that I took Catalyst. I've done it 7 times. The first time that I did Catalyst, it was really a depressing season for me, because here I was running my businesses in a certain way, very successfully. But Michael's teaching us to run our businesses in a little bit of a different way. And I said to Michael, I'm just so tired of muscling my way through the businesses. I'm so tired of being the one who has to do everything. And I learned now that I was only doing that because I wasn't using these proven systems and processes and techniques in order to run a business. You do it. You help people with with EOS implementation. And it's like, sometimes it's like, it's so simple. This can't possibly work this way, you know, but we all have to know, because we learn by association. And if we don't know, we don't know what we don't know, you know? So I'm sure you find
most people are just by fear.
Yeah.
They're doing the first thing they're accustomed to. And because they don't have a system, because they're the only ones, I mean, they pick up the hammer and they start nailing it, but they're nailing the wrong nail into the wrong type of material.
Right.
And then it's back to that square one. I mean, did you find a way to have the business run with as little involvement from you as possible, or were you like a day-to-day guy?
I think depending on the restaurant, you know, certain businesses and certain business models need a little bit more of the owners or someone really driving that business's attention. And although I had a really great management team at one point, so the first year I took one of the businesses and I took that through the Catalyst instruction. And then the next year I did the next business, and the next year I did the next business. And I just kept going through that and making those kind of improvements. But I realized, and I decided that I would need to make a pivot in one of my businesses, because the business model did not work without me involving myself in the model. And that was eye-opening for me, is realizing where I had written myself into the business model in so many different places in that particular business. And it was never going to run without me.
How much was the impact from 2020? I feel like there's two types of the way your business ran, before 2020 and then after, and just especially in a service business, It's completely changed. Employee expectations have dramatically shifted. This flexible idea where they don't need to necessarily come to work, and there's plenty other opportunities out there. Did that help you make the decision to sell? Was that a factor?
I think part of the factor was of even entertaining the ideas, having been in Forum. I've been in EO for 8 years now. We've just finished we had our 8th retreat. And things like what you were asking earlier about me pre-EO and post-EO or after joining EO, I feel like things they were much more chaotic before EO. And as I look back, they seem to have went a lot slower. But once I found that formula in EO, things happened so fast. I never thought I would sell my business. I never thought that would happen. I couldn't even fathom it or imagine it. But then you get exposed to all these people who are doing all these different things, all these amazing things. And you're like, wow, could I do that?
Oh, it was like a desire to do something outside of the industry you're in?
Partially.
Oh, wow.
Part of it is just to be involved in business in a different way. I think sometimes we feel a little bit trapped by our business. Here we created this monster, and now we have to live in this monster. With my knowledge from Catalyst and having helped so many entrepreneurs with their businesses, I just felt like, well, why am I staying stuck in this area when there's so much more that I could do? And I really enjoy helping people, just like the both of you do. We really enjoy helping people. And I think that's one of I don't know too many people in EO that don't enjoy giving back.
What was a situation maybe you had in your business where you brought to Forum for assistance?
I'm glad you asked that, because I actually went back through all my presentations because I knew you were going to ask that question. Well, because it's such an interesting thing, and I can track it back to 2016 when I gave my first presentation about being so stressed out that I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was becoming that age where men in my industry have their first heart attack, and most of them don't survive that first heart attack. And I knew if I didn't get my stress under control, I could be one of those statistics. So I presented on stress, and I've got the feedback from everybody, And the interesting part is we think it's still my decision. Whatever I do is still my decision, even though I present it to some different people. But what I really get is a different perspective in a different context. One of the best things that I heard, and I think I went to a regional moderator summit for EO. It was fantastic. I hear you talk about going to moderator training. I went to the regional moderator summit. It was fantastic because there's people from all over our region who are involved in different levels of Forum. And one of the things that one of the presenters said was, what's interesting about Forum and what's unique about Forum is these 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 people that you have in your forum are the only people in your life who see you the way that you want to see yourself in the future. Everybody else sees you as you are now or who they need you to be. Your forum mates understand who you want to be and want to help you get there. And so that's the way they see you too. They see you the way you want to see yourself in the future. And I thought that was the most beautiful thing I heard. And I think that's really, really true. And so one of the things that I get from my forum is they're able to mirror back to me the context of what it is why am I doing this? And how does this fit into what it is that I really, truly want to do? And I think one of the things is, and part of the decision that went into selling my business is, and I remember I was at one of my restaurants and I was just not with it. I was just upset for some reason. And I have a real estate mentor, and he was sitting at the end of the bar. And he says, "What is wrong with you?" I said, "I am just so frustrated." He's like, "Why are you frustrated?" I said, "Because I'm not reaching my goals anymore." He goes, "Why aren't you reaching your goals?" And I thought for a second, I'm like, it's not true. Not that I'm not reaching my goals anymore. It's that I've reached my goals, but I'm still doing the same things. And I haven't set new goals. Why? Because I thought the goals that I had reached, I thought they'd be my retirement goals. You know, I'm 46, 47 years old, and I've already reached the goals that I thought would be my retirement goals. You know, the year that I made 10 times more money than my dad, I had a really hard time with that because my dad worked so hard, you know, and we worked so hard, but to be rewarded for that hard work, that was new to me. And so I actually hired a coach, someone who did a lot of work with EO, and she kind of confronted me with what my real true goals were. But they were scary. They were really scary goals. You know?
Goals that are scary are real good goals.
So they took those goals that you had already reached and they were way beyond that, I assume.
Well, yeah, but they were different, right? Because because I'd reached my financial goals, and now these were a lot more personal goals, right? Like
Purpose-led goals or?
A lot of giving back stuff, right? Doing things with Catalyst,
Right.
you know, being much more involved with mentorship and investing in companies and then mentoring those entrepreneurs to be successful, being on boards, you know, just being able to give back from this experience, which is really scary to put yourself out there and do things. You know, we see it, we do it. You know, I mean, a lot of people would love to host their own podcast, but they're too scared to do it. A lot of people would like to have a YouTube channel where they teach people about entrepreneurship, but they're too scared to do it. Hell, my website, Charette.com, isn't up and running. Why? Too scared. Too scared to figure out what's going to go on there. But you know what? One of my forum mates has a beautiful website that he uses to push his business. And he's like, I want to be your advisor on this. I want to help you with this. So we get a lot of that. So I'm still kind of answering your question about the decision to sell. So that's part of it. It's like, I've already reached these goals. And, you know, it's like in certain things, once I heard this once, and I hope it's okay to share this. In dog racing, the greyhound dog racing, no matter how you feel about it, it's not what this is about. But they say that once the dog catches the rabbit, he will never race again. And that's kind of what it feels like sometimes when you're an entrepreneur and you reach that big goal. It's like, wow, okay, that's it. You know, the heavens didn't open up. You know, no one blew confetti all over the place when I reached this goal. This is it. You know,
I had a similar experience telling our team what our revenue was for the year, and I couldn't even get excited about it. It was like, okay, we did it. Moving on. Nobody even raised an eyebrow. We just went right back to work.
Yeah.
It's a weird experience, though. You expect more celebration.
And I think that's why as leaders, we have to create celebration.
Yes.
You know? And that's one of the things that one of my mentors said, if you don't celebrate these things, then you teach people that there is no reward for hard work. You know, so we got to create that. We got to create that in our businesses.
Yep.
You know, and then I remember before the tornado, before 2020, I was talking to Michael Burcham. And I said, you know, I'm thinking about selling my companies. And he laughed. And I said, well, what's that? He's like, Matt, you can't sell your companies. I'm like, Michael, I'm pretty sure I can. He's like, no, Matt, so much of your identity is wrapped up in these businesses. If you sell your companies, you're going to be miserable and you're not going to know what to do with yourself.
Was he true?
So I spent that next few years, obviously I had the tornado to deal with things, and then, COVID and the recovery. And yeah, I tried really to make sure that when we relaunched these businesses, it wasn't all me. It wasn't all my identity. It was these businesses that stood on their own. And, what he said was true then, but it's not true now, because I worked towards removing my identity from those businesses. So I think I'm in a much better position than a lot of people who have sold their businesses. And I've heard their stories here on this podcast of like, well, what do I do now? Who am I? So that was some really, really great advice.
Have you figured that out yet?
What's next?
Who are you?
Who am I? I think we're all a work in progress, but I do feel like I have a direction, I've done the plant-based journeys too. Like I said, when I came back from Desert Storm, I might have left the country, but the war didn't leave me. And that was a huge issue in my life. I asked my therapist, and it was through EO that I found help, because we do this thing called EO Talks.
Yeah.
And one of our members got up there and shared about his experiences with trauma and the cure and the relief that he had found. And I was so triggered after that. Trauma triggers trauma. We know that. And when he was sharing his trauma, it triggered mine. Wow. And I had a really bad experience where I went off on my little kids. I was so triggered. I'd been drinking a lot, and I kind of lost it on my kids. And I knew at that moment that I needed help. So I reached out to Samira, and she found out who that person's therapist was. And they got me in contact with it. And I reached out to the therapist, and she said, I'm on a waiting list. It's going to be 3 to 6 months. I said, well, so-and-so recommended me. She said, can you be here on Friday?
Yeah.
That's the power of EO.
That's the power.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And she got me in, and I worked with her for many years. And I asked her, I said, if it wasn't for PTSD, would I have been so successful? She just kind of shrugged her shoulders and said, you might not have been. In a lot of ways, PTSD is a superpower. In a lot of ways, it's a really terrible thing that, and I would say, and I said it at my EO talk because I wanted to give back. So I did the EO talk on my journey with PTSD and cures such as EMDR or plant-based medicine.
I remember that. That was a great talk.
Thank you. And I same thing. Just like I didn't want to say that I suffered from PTSD because I dealt with PTSD. I lived with PTSD. I self-medicated from PTSD. But it was really my friends and family who suffered from my PTSD, really my family, my children and my wife. And what brought me to the cure was I just couldn't live another day with it. I just couldn't. And then I found out that there was these things like psychedelics that could help you with your PTSD and trauma. And there's studies done that this actually works. And I'm here to tell you that it works, and it worked for me. And
honestly, I think that's something that we could do a better job on this podcast talking about mental health, because it is something that arrives in every single forum, at least one presentation a year. Really, it revolves around this mental health thing. And, and just hearing other stories of people going through something is so impactful, because it at least gets you to start thinking, well, maybe I could go down this path, or maybe I need to reach out to this person. And I would just walk with a member yesterday and literally a conversation about suicide and the path that he's went on. He's now speaking to other people about it and gotten help. And just like, these are really normal stories, because most entrepreneurs have trauma built into them.
Yeah.
And it is something that gave us a superpower. So yeah, would we be where we are if we didn't have it? Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of how we can process it, deal with it, move on, and now it's our role to help other people.
Right.
At the risk of sounding like a preacher, every event that we have, almost every event, there's medication there that's poison, that just helps make it worse. And you remember me coming to Catalyst Forum and updates. I'm hungover, and I was for years I was doing the same thing.
But and to Robert's point too, that's what EO is, right? It's experience shares. That it's that someone taking that first step of vulnerability to share something, and you're like, oh my God, that's how I feel too. I didn't know anybody else in the world felt this way. I didn't know anybody else went through this.
Right.
And then being able to find out how they dealt with it or what they're doing. It's really remarkable.
What feedback would you offer? We just met, let's say, and I'm joining EO. What would be like your 1 minute spiel, like how to get the most out of this experience?
Like everyone says, just be as involved as you can be. I remember thinking, I can't join EO. I can't spend 4 hours a month in a forum. I am too busy. You're too busy because you're working your business in the wrong way. If you learn the tools to be able to operate your business successfully, you'll free up some of your time. I know that sounds cliche and there's a bunch of books written about it, but there's a lot of truth to that. And I just think being able to be involved, get to know as many people as you can, share yourself, like we say, it's not really about what I get from it. It's more about what I give to it. And that's where the real gift is. I always say, because I've done so many presentations and I'm very vulnerable and very honest in my forum, I say, I look around my forum and I think they're wondering, how does Matt even put on his pants in the morning? This guy can't figure anything out, because I just try to be as honest as I can be about whatever the problem is that I'm facing. In fact, one of my presentations, my prep work was 30 pages long. I pulled that out. I'm like, let me print this out. Oh my God, it's 30 pages long.
Wow.
And I went through it, and then with my coach, I was able to narrow it down into a succinct presentation and be able to get feedback from it, going back to Catalyst. I remember it was several years back. And how did I get so involved in Catalyst? The organization, there's members of the organization who thought I might make a pretty decent president of the organization. And they were saying they wanted me to throw my hat into the ring. And I was like, I don't know. We were going on retreat and I'm like, well, let me present this to my forum and see what they think about this, And so on retreat, they gave me 30 minutes and I did a presentation. Why do I want to do this? The standard kind of questions. And people were giving me feedback. No one in my forum had been president. So they didn't really know what that entailed, but they said, Matt, you seem pretty excited about it. You should probably do it. And then we came around to Michael, and I have his permission to share this story. That's one of the things that we do in forum is we don't share anything that happened in our forum, confidentiality, without permission. So I do have permission to share this story. And it came around to Michael, and Michael said, Matt, why would you do this? It seems to me that this goal of being president isn't in alignment with any of your other goals. That's one of the major things that we do on our retreats is we figure out our goals. He said, but something that is much more in alignment with your goals is, why don't you help me teach Catalyst? And I was like, why, Michael? Because it just scares the hell out of me. It wasn't something that I would have seen myself actually doing. Helping people through the program, coaching, mentoring, all that stuff. Yes. But actually up there teaching, boy, that was it's so scary, such a scary thing. But I also realized that I can coach one-on-one, maybe 10, 15 people a month. But when I get up in front of that class, I've got 40 or 50 people who I can help in that time frame. And so it's a really powerful way to reach a lot of people. And, and again, it's that kind of thing where I presented something to forum where I thought the outcome or the feedback was going to be one thing, and I walk away with it being something completely different. That
you were totally comfortable with that decision.
With the decision to help teach Catalyst? Yeah. No, no, not at all. And then, to be honest, it took several years to get me to the point where I would actually be comfortable in front of the room teaching, And I think that's the truth about a lot of decisions that come up in, for me at least, in our forum is, we do this presentation and then we think we're going to make a decision. But I realize for me, it's more of a an evolution rather than this is what I'm going to do. It's more about, oh, let me consider all these pieces and parts and see how they flow together. And, sometimes we do have to go back, and one of the things that we do is the month after you give your presentation, you give an update. And then if you still haven't resolved it, you're kind of expected to continue giving your update.
That's a good rule of thumb to follow.
I know Michael Burcham well enough. He doesn't want to hear the same thing over and over again, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny that the things that you resist are often the things you're supposed to do, because if it's making you feel uncomfortable, where's the uncomfort coming from?
Yeah.
Is it a skill? Is it your ego not feeling confident enough to tackle it? I mean, but we only get comfortable when we do the things that make us uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for me, it's, one of the things realizing is, and it's one of the things you just got to do it. You got to jump in and do it. And now I find myself approaching the class of, oh my gosh, what am I not going to teach? There is so much that we can teach about this subject. How do we make this understandable? Can't give people too much. There's always so much more to learn. But I realized for me, what I try to do is I try to teach the black and the white and then answer the questions around the gray. And I find that to be a good rule of thumb for being able to get up in front of people and talk about things is, talk about the knowns and don't take it too far. Try to give people something that they can walk away with.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. If you are an entrepreneur here in Nashville, Tennessee, and you are curious about this little community called EO Nashville, you can go visit us at eonashville.com. Learn all about 350-ish of us gathered together in a setting we call Forum every single month and really help you with some of those decisions. If you are interested in learning more, visit eonashville.com. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks for listening to the Decision Podcast by Nashville EO. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.